Chapter 1. The Divorce Letter. Zoe Jacobs had always believed that love, no matter how complicated, was worth fighting for. So when she opened the crisp white envelope resting on the kitchen counter, her fingers trembled. She didn't need to see the signature at the bottom to know who had sent it. The chilling clarity of the header, "Divorce Agreement," said it all. Her chest constricted. She reached for the kitchen island to steady herself, the sunlight pouring through the window feeling too warm against her clammy skin. The air suddenly seemed thinner, as though her world had been vacuum-sealed in shock. It wasn't that things had been perfect with Ivan. No, they had been anything but. He was always distant, always buried in work, and always shutting her out with cool politeness that stung more than yelling ever could. But she had hoped, naively, that there was still time. So love. That maybe he was worth the wait. But now this. Her eyes dropped back to the paper, scanning through the clinical, unfeeling language. This agreement serves to formally end the marriage between Ivan Chou and Zoe Jacobs under mutual consent. Mutual consent? She let out a bitter laugh. He hadn't even called. No explanation. No discussion. Just a signature line and a legal seal. And the cruelest part? The small flutter in her belly reminded her why she couldn't afford to collapse. Her hand instinctively covered her stomach. 2 months. 2 months since she found out. 2 months of holding the secret close, telling herself the timing wasn't right, that Ivan had enough on his plate with his company, that maybe when things calmed down. But things never calmed down. Ivan had pulled further and further away, becoming a ghost of the man she fell in love with. And now he wanted out, without ever knowing the life quietly growing inside her. Zoe folded the letter and tucked it back into the envelope. She paced the apartment slowly, numb, each step echoing in the silence of their shared home. The framed wedding photo on the bookshelf seemed to mock her. Ivan's dark eyes, cool and unreadable even in a smile, stared back at her. He had always been an enigma. Brilliant, ambitious, and untouchable. When they met, she'd fallen in love with the quiet strength he carried, the way his words were few but meaningful. But over time that silence turned into distance. That strength into walls. He picked up the frame and hesitated, then put it face down. That evening she tried calling him. Not to argue. Not to beg. Just to understand. But the call went to voicemail on the first ring. "Ivan, it's me," she whispered. "I got the letter. I'm not angry. I just wish we could have talked." She hesitated, biting her lip as her throat tightened. "There's something I wanted to tell you. Something important. But maybe it doesn't matter now." She didn't mention the baby. The time for that had passed. The next day, Zoe met with her lawyer. She signed the papers with a calm she didn't feel. Her hand shook only once, when she wrote her name for the last time as Zoe Chou. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Her lawyer, a kind older woman, asked gently. Zoe nodded. "I don't think there's anything left to save." She didn't cry. She walked out of the building, the city buzzing around her, her marriage now legally over. But inside her, 2 tiny heartbeats beat steadily on. The decision came easily after that. Zoe booked a one-way ticket to Italy. Her college friend Amelia had extended the invitation months ago, begging her to come and help with an art restoration project in Florence. Back then Zoe had declined. Now it felt like fate. She packed only what she needed. Left the rest behind. Gave notice at work. Cancelled her lease. 2 weeks later she stood at the airport gate, one hand on her small carry-on, the other protectively cradling her belly. This was the end of her story with Ivan Chou. And the beginning of something else. Not just for her but for the lives she was about to bring into the world. Months passed like the turning of fragile pages in a new book. The first trimester passed with nausea and fatigue, but Amelia took care of her like a sister. Zoe poured her heart into drawing, designing small boutique buildings with passion and focus. At night she'd whisper to her belly, telling her babies how much they were already loved. On a cold December morning she gave birth to Zayn and Zion, 2 tiny miracles with soft black hair and noses that made her ache with bittersweet recognition. They had Ivan's eyes. She never sent him a picture. Never wrote. Never called. If he hadn't wanted her, he didn't deserve them. But still, some nights when the boys were asleep and the apartment was quiet, she would sit by the window with a blanket around her shoulders, staring at the moon, wondering if he ever thought of her. If he ever regretted letting her go. 5 years would pass before their paths would cross again. By then, Zoe would no longer be the trembling girl with a broken heart. She would be stronger. A mother. A woman who knew her worth. And Ivan? He would meet 2 boys who would unknowingly turn his world upside down. And fall in love with the family he never knew he had. Chapter 2. New Life Abroad. The early morning sunlight filtered through gauzy white curtains as Zoe Jacobs stood on the tiny balcony of her apartment in Florence, a steaming cup of tea cradled in her hands. Below, cobblestone streets stirred to life with the clink of shop doors and the soft hum of scooters. The air carried the scent of fresh bread from the bakery downstairs. It had been nearly 6 months since she arrived in Italy, and 4 months since Zane and Zion were born. Zoe glanced back into the apartment. 2 bassinets sat side by side near the window, where soft lullabies played from a small Bluetooth speaker. The boys were still asleep, their tiny chests rising and falling in unison. She took a sip of her tea, savoring the quiet before the day began. Life now was a different kind of busy. No more meetings, no architectural deadlines, no distant husband. Just her and the twins. And peace. But peace hadn't come easily. The pregnancy had been harder than she expected. Emotionally more than physically. Every flutter, every kick reminded her that she was preparing for motherhood alone. There had been nights she cried herself to sleep, clinging to the boys' ultrasound photos like lifelines. She never told Ivan. Never reached out. He had made his choice. So she made hers. And yet, every now and then, she wondered if he ever sensed what he had lost. Amelia burst through the door, arms full of fresh groceries and a flower bouquet tucked under one arm. I brought croissants. And tulips. And more wipes. Because those boys are little poop factories. Zoe laughed, setting down her tea. You spoil us. You're a single mom of twins, Zoe. That makes you a superhero. This is the least I can do. They embraced and Amelia set the food on the table. I can watch the twins for a bit today if you want to go sketch in the park. Zoe hesitated. They're still so young. You need air. Sunshine. Coffee that hasn't gone cold. Later that afternoon, Zoe sat under an old olive tree in the nearby garden plaza with her sketchpad open. Her pencil moved in sweeping curves, shaping the facade of a boutique cafe she'd been imagining for weeks. Architecture was still in her blood. It was the one part of her old life that hadn't hurt to keep. She glanced at the drawing and smiled. Maybe someday she'd build it. A place where she and the boys could make new memories. Is that your own design? A stranger asked in accented English. Zoe looked up to see a man in his 50s, with a warm smile and a leather sketchbook under one arm. It is, she said. Just a concept. It's beautiful. You have an architect's hand. Zoe chuckled softly. I was one. Back in another life. The man introduced himself as Lorenzo, a retired professor of design. They talked about architecture, art, and the stories behind Florence's hidden alleyways. For the first time in a long time, Zoe felt like herself again. Not just a mother, not just a heartbroken woman, but an artist. Back at the apartment, Amelia was singing off-key to the twins as they giggled in their rockers. Zane's got your serious eyes, she said, lifting him. But this one, Zion, he's pure mischief. Zoe kissed both boys and whispered, Mommy's home. She changed them into pajamas, fed them warm bottles and rocked them gently. As they drifted off, she sang softly. You're my sunshine in this storm. My calm in every fight. I'll love you every morning. And hold you every night. The days melted into weeks. Zoe found a small part-time job designing cafe interiors remotely for a boutique firm. It allowed her to work from home, snuggle her babies and still chase her passion. The twins grew quickly. Zane took his first step at 10 months. Quiet, balanced, serious. Zion followed 2 weeks later, running headfirst into the couch with a triumphant grin. They had Ivan's stubborn determination. And despite everything, Zoe was glad for it. She wanted them to have his strength, just not his silence. Each time she saw their dark brown eyes, the same shade as the man who'd once broken her heart, her resolve wavered a little. But she never called. She never wrote. She promised herself she wouldn't let them grow up resenting someone who never had the chance to love them. So instead of bitterness, she gave them bedtime stories, birthday cupcakes, and all the love she had. They asked about their father once. Where is Daddy? Zane had asked quietly one night, tucked under the covers. Zoe's heart clenched. She stroked his hair and whispered, "He's far away, sweetheart. But you're safe and you're so, so loved." It was the truth. Maybe not the whole truth, but enough for now. When the boys turned 4, Amelia threw a pirate-themed birthday party in the backyard. Zoe made cupcakes shaped like treasure chests and sewed matching blue bandanas for the twins. Laughter rang through the house, and for that afternoon the weight of the past faded. But a call that evening would change everything. Her old firm in the Philippines reached out. They were launching a new commercial project and wanted her to lead the design team, remote work for now, but with potential on-site planning in a few months. They remembered her talent. And they wanted her back. Zoe stood by the window for a long time after the call, watching her boys play with toy swords on the rug. Could she go back? Back to the place where her heart had shattered? She had left everything behind, her name, her marriage, her former self. But maybe now, after 5 years, she could return stronger. Not for Ivan. Not for closure. But for her sons. 3 months later, Zoe stood in the arrival hall of the Manila airport, a sleepy Zion in one arm and Zane clutching her other hand. Her heart thudded with nerves, but her steps were steady. She had a job waiting. She had her boys. And she had no intention of ever letting the past hurt her again. But fate, ever unpredictable, had other plans. Chapter 3, 5 years later. The corporate skyline of Manila had barely changed, yet Zoe Jacobs felt like a stranger returning to a place she once called home. She adjusted the strap of her handbag as she stepped out of the airport terminal, her twin sons in tow, eyes wide with excitement. "Mommy, is this where you used to live?" Zane asked, gripping her hand tightly. "Yes, sweetheart. Mommy grew up here," Zoe said, smiling down at him. Zion skipped ahead with a toy plane in hand. "Does this mean we'll have adventures here now?" Zoe couldn't help but laugh. "Lots of them." The boys didn't know that the city held more than memories for her. It held secrets, heartbreak, and a love she had never fully let go of. But that was the past. Now, she was back as a lead designer for a prestigious commercial project, not the broken woman she'd been 5 years ago. She had healed. She had grown. And she had her sons. Zoe's new office was nestled in an Art Deco-style building just minutes away from Araminta Tower, the headquarters of Chou Enterprises, the largest architectural and development conglomerate in the country. She had hoped she'd never have to hear that name again. But fate had other ideas. On her first week back, Zoe's firm won the bid to renovate one of Chou Enterprises' properties, a luxury community center in the city's South District. When the project manager mentioned the collaboration, Zoe's fingers froze on her keyboard. "Chou Enterprises?" she echoed. "Yes," he said. "You'll likely meet the CEO during the initial review." Zoe's stomach dropped. Ivan Chou was not a man you forgot. Even now, 5 years later, his name held power in every corner of Araminta's corporate world. Brilliant. Untouchable. She had once loved him with every fiber of her being. And he had discarded her without a second glance. Still, she squared her shoulders. She wasn't here for him. She was here for her work and her children. It was Zion, as always, who made things messy in the most unexpected way. On her 3rd day at the office, Zoe brought the twins with her to finalize floor samples. The boys were supposed to stay in the lounge with Amelia, who now worked as Zoe's part-time assistant. But while Amelia was distracted on a call, Zion wandered off with Zane trailing behind. They slipped through the automatic doors of the adjacent building, the entrance to Chou Enterprises' executive wing. Zion pressed the elevator button with glee. "Let's go to the top like spies," he whispered to Zane. The elevator dinged open. Ivan stood in his 40th floor office, reviewing proposals with a furrowed brow, when the door burst open. A security guard rushed in. "Mr. Chou, I'm sorry." 2 kids ran in. Then came the sound of small footsteps. "Wow." Zion gasped. "This place is like a spaceship." Zane followed, eyes wide at the panoramic skyline. Ivan looked up, stunned. "What?" The twins stopped and stared at him. Ivan blinked. The resemblance struck him like a thunderbolt. Both boys had dark brown eyes. One quiet and thoughtful. The other wild and fearless. Zion stepped forward with a grin. "Are you the boss of this whole building?" Ivan looked between them, lost for words. "Yes. I suppose I am." "Cool." Zion beamed. "Can we see the view?" Ivan hesitated, but curiosity overpowered reason. He walked over and led them to the massive window. "You like heights?" he asked. "Only if there's no falling," Zane muttered, clutching his brother's sleeve. Ivan cracked a rare smile. "Smart." For a moment it felt oddly natural. Two kids. One quiet, one loud. Both captivating. Then the door opened again, this time with fury. "Zion." "Zane." Zoe's voice rang out, breathless with panic. Ivan turned. Their eyes met. Time stopped. Zoe froze, the color draining from her face. Ivan stood tall in his dark suit, but his usual cool expression had faded. In its place was stunned recognition, and something else she couldn't read. "You," he said softly. Zoe swallowed hard. "They didn't mean to come here." "I'm sorry." He looked from her to the boys, then back. "They're yours." Zoe forced a calm smile. "Yes. My sons." "You never said you had children." "I didn't think it mattered," she said, her voice clipped. Ivan's eyes narrowed slightly, his gaze flicking to Zion, who was now spinning Ivan's pen like a baton, and to Zane, who silently returned the stare. "How old are they?" Zoe hesitated, then said evenly, "They just turned 5. Ivan's jaw tightened. But before he could speak, Zion ran up to him and tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Boss, can we come back and see the view again?" Ivan crouched down. "Maybe." Zion grinned, then skipped back to Zoe. Ivan straightened. "We should talk." Zoe lifted her chin. "We already said everything we needed to 5 years ago." Then she turned and walked out, the twins' hands in hers, never looking back. But Ivan Chou was no fool. He spent the entire night staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene in his office. 5 years old. Zoe. Twins. The timing was too perfect. He opened his safe and pulled out an old photo. One of him and Zoe on their honeymoon. She had laughed freely then. Looked at him like he was her whole world. He had thrown it all away. Because of a lie. A trap set by his father. A misunderstanding that had driven Zoe to tears the night she begged him to listen, and he had walked away. And now she was back with 2 boys who looked just like him. Back in her apartment, Zoe watched Zane and Zion sleep, nestled in the same bed. Their cheeks were flushed from excitement, their little bodies worn out. She gently brushed a curl from Zane's forehead. "You met him today," she whispered. "Your father." Tears welled in her eyes. She had thought she was ready. But she hadn't expected them to walk into his office. Hadn't expected him to see them. Now everything she had tried to protect was at risk. But one thing was certain. She would never let Ivan Chou hurt her sons. Not again. Chapter 4. A Chance Encounter. Ivan Chou wasn't the kind of man to lose sleep over emotions. Yet for the first time in years he lay awake at night thinking not of company mergers or board meetings, but of 2 small boys who barged into his office with toy planes and mischievous grins. Zion's bold curiosity. Zane's watchful silence. And Zoe, standing in his doorway like a memory brought to life. He had replayed every second of that encounter. Their ages. Their eyes. His gut told him what his mind refused to believe. And so, when his executive assistant informed him that the project lead from the design firm, Ms. Zoe Jacobs, would be attending their next site inspection, Ivan didn't reschedule. Instead he showed up 10 minutes early. The community center construction site buzzed with activity. Men in hard hats, scaffolding, and the low hum of machinery. Zoe stood off to the side, clipboard in hand, reviewing the revised blueprint. She felt his presence before she saw him. Ivan's tall figure emerged from the entrance, his dark suit immaculate despite the dust, his eyes fixed on her. Zoe tensed, but she didn't flinch. "I didn't think you'd personally attend," she said without looking up. Ivan stopped beside her. "It's a priority project." Zoe handed the clipboard to an engineer, then turned to him. "Let's be clear. I'm here as a professional. Whatever happened between us is in the past." He nodded. Understood. But his gaze lingered. He was different now. Still beautiful, yes, but sharper, more composed. She held herself like someone who had rebuilt her entire world from ash. He admired that. "What are their names?" he asked quietly. Zoe's guard rose instantly. "That's not your business." Ivan didn't argue. A week later he saw them again, accidentally, or so he told himself. He was leaving a meeting near the university district when he spotted Zoe seated at a sidewalk cafe, sipping coffee. Across from her, Zane was quietly coloring in a sketchbook while Zion animatedly tried to talk to a pigeon. Ivan stood frozen for a moment. Then before he could think better of it, he approached. Zion was the first to see him. "Hey, boss man," he cried, jumping up. Zoe's head whipped around in surprise. "Zion, sit down." But it was too late. Ivan was already beside them. "I was passing by," he said. "Didn't expect to run into you here." Zion beamed. "Wanna sit with us? I finished my chocolate milk." Zoe opened her mouth to object, but Ivan had already taken the seat beside Zane. Zane looked up warily, then lowered his eyes back to his sketchpad. "What are you drawing?" Ivan asked gently. Zane turned the pad so he could see. A sketch of a tall building, childlike but surprisingly detailed. Ivan was quiet for a moment. "That's really good." Zane shrugged. "Mommy's an architect. I want to be one too." Zoe's lips tightened. Ivan smiled faintly. "That's a great dream." Zion leaned over. "I want to be a dinosaur hunter." "That's also very brave," Ivan said with a chuckle. Zoe stood abruptly. "We should go." Zion pouted. "But we just sat down." Ivan met her eyes. "Can I see them again?" Zoe hesitated. "They like you," she admitted. "But I won't let them get attached to someone who's going to disappear again." "I'm not going anywhere," he said softly. Her heart twisted. "Not for them," she said. "For yourself." Then she turned away, gathering the boys and walking off down the street, their little hands clutched tightly in hers. But Ivan didn't stop. Over the next few weeks he showed up more. At the site inspections. At project meetings. Even at the bookstore where Zoe took the twins every Friday. Each time the boys lit up. Zion called him boss man. Zane warmed up slowly, then began shyly showing him his drawings. One afternoon Ivan helped Zane choose a book about building bridges. They sat on a small bench, flipping through the pages together. "Did you know bridges have to hold a lot of weight?" Zane asked seriously. Ivan nodded. "They carry people, cars, even trains. Mommy says bridges are like people. If you make them strong enough, they won't fall." Ivan stared at the boy, speechless. That evening, Zoe stood on her balcony watching the sunset with a cup of tea. She had watched Ivan around the boys. How he knelt to their level, never talked down to them, and listened, really listened. How he looked at them like they were miracles. She saw something she hadn't expected. Regret. But also wonder. The painful truth was he didn't know they were his. And her heart warred between keeping the truth hidden, or setting it free. Chapter 5, Sweet Strangers. The city shimmered in the golden haze of late afternoon. In the open courtyard of a modern bookstore cafe, laughter floated through the air as Zion zipped between tables, a superhero cape fluttering behind him. Ivan sat quietly at a corner table, a cup of black coffee cooling in front of him. Across from him, Zane was carefully assembling a paper model of a suspension bridge, his little brows furrowed in focus. Zoe stood a few feet away watching them through the tall glass windows. It had become a familiar scene over the past few weeks. Ivan and the twins, gravitating to each other like magnets. She had tried to limit their interaction, tried to keep their worlds separate. But Zane and Zion adored him. They didn't know who he really was, their father, but they already loved him without needing the label. Zoe stepped inside and took a seat beside Zion, who flopped into her lap with a giggle. "Bossman said my drawing looks like a real spaceship," he whispered proudly. "I'm sure it does," Zoe said, brushing his hair from his forehead. Ivan looked up, his eyes catching hers. There was no smugness there, no games. His sincerity. "Zane's been helping me design his dream bridge," Ivan said. Zane nodded without looking up. "Uncle Ivan said engineers and architects have to work together." Zoe's heart skipped. "Uncle Ivan." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "He's right." Ivan's eyes lingered on her a moment longer before returning to the model. "He's a sharp kid." "They both are." Zoe looked away, her voice soft. "They didn't get that from me alone." Later, as they packed up to leave, Ivan offered to carry their bag of books to the car. "I can manage," Zoe said, but Zion grabbed Ivan's hand without hesitation. "Come with us, boss man." Ivan glanced at Zoe. She hesitated, then gave a quiet nod. As they walked toward the parking lot, Zane suddenly asked, "Uncle Ivan, do you have kids?" Ivan paused. "No. I don't." Why not? Zion chimed in. You'd be a cool dad. Ivan's breath caught. He looked at Zoe, who was frozen beside him, her face unreadable. I guess. I never had the chance, Ivan said carefully. Zion tilted his head. Well, you can be our part-time dad. Zoe quickly intervened. Boys. Ivan knelt down, trying to hold himself together. I don't know about that. But I'll always be here if you need me, okay? Zane nodded solemnly. Zion gave him a sticky-fingered hug. Zoe stood in stunned silence. That night, Ivan sat alone in his high-rise apartment, the lights of the city glittering outside his floor-to-ceiling windows. His usually pristine office was littered with paper models and pencil sketches Zane had given him. He couldn't shake the feeling. He wasn't just fond of the boys. He felt them in him. Zion's laugh. Zane's quiet focus. It wasn't just familiarity. It was something deeper. Something blood deep. The truth tugged at him like a ghost he could no longer ignore. Meanwhile, at Zoe's apartment, she gently brushed her son's hair as they fell asleep. Zane murmured, Do you think Uncle Ivan would come to my school play? Zion yawned. Yeah. He likes us. Even if he doesn't say it all mushy. Zoe tucked the blankets tighter around them. They were falling for him. Not as a stranger. Not even as Uncle Ivan. They were falling for their father. And he had no idea. The next day, Zoe met Ivan at the site for a final materials check. The boys were in daycare for once, giving her and Ivan rare time alone. He greeted her with a quiet, good morning, but his usual ease with her was replaced by an unsettling calm. As they walked the unfinished halls of the community center, Ivan finally stopped beside a window overlooking the city. I want to ask you something, he said. Zoe tensed. Ivan turned to her, his voice low but steady. Are they mine? The world tilted. Zoe's throat tightened. She stared at him, lips parted, but no words came. I've done the math. I've seen their faces. I feel it, Zoe. Her eyes filled with tears, but she looked away. You left me, she whispered. You gave me divorce papers like I was nothing. I thought you didn't love me, he said, his voice cracking. I thought you gave up on us. Zoe's head snapped back to him. I begged you to listen. But you were already gone. I made a mistake, he said. I know that now. Silence hung between them. Zoe's hands shook. Yes, she said finally. They're yours. Ivan closed his eyes as the weight of her words crashed over him. My sons, he whispered. When he opened his eyes again, they were filled with something Zoe hadn't seen in years. Love. Regret. Longing. Chapter 6. The past between us. Ivan didn't speak for a long time after Zoe's confession. They stood in the quiet, half-finished corridor of the community center. The scent of sawdust filled the air. Outside, the city buzzed as always. But between them, time seemed to slow, suspended between past and present. They're really mine, he said again, more to himself than to her. Zoe crossed her arms tightly over her chest. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Her gaze snapped to his. You don't get to ask that. Ivan winced, but he nodded. I tried, Zoe said, her voice trembling. I called. I left messages. I waited. But you never looked back. I was angry, confused, afraid. She shook her head. You handed me divorce papers without a word, Ivan. No explanation. No goodbye. You threw me away like I meant nothing. He took a step toward her. That's not true. You never even gave me the chance to tell you I was pregnant. Ivan's breath hitched. She turned her back to him, staring out the window. I found out 2 weeks after you left. I was going to tell you. I thought maybe you'd come back. But you didn't. And I realized I couldn't raise my children around a man who had no room for them in his world. He was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke softly. My father lied to me. Zoe froze. Ivan continued. He told me you were unfaithful. He showed me fake messages. A photo. I didn't believe it at first, but he made me doubt everything. Zoe turned slowly, tears clinging to her lashes. I thought I was protecting myself from heartbreak. But I was protecting myself from the only woman I've ever loved, he said. Her breath caught. By the time I realized the truth, you were gone, he finished. I searched for you, Zoe. I did. But you changed numbers. Moved abroad. No trace. I had to, she whispered. For my sanity. For them. He nodded, ashamed. I deserved that. The pain in her eyes was deeper than anything he had prepared for. She had carried the burden of his betrayal and raised their sons alone, with strength, with grace. I missed their first words, he murmured. Their first steps. Zoe's lips trembled. You missed everything. I want to make it right, he said. I know I can't go back, but please, let me be part of their lives now. Zoe looked at him, torn. They already love you. Without even knowing who you are. I won't hurt them, he promised. You have my word. For the next few days, Zoe wrestled with herself. Zion and Zane were full of questions. Why is Uncle Ivan always around now? Why does he smile at us like that? Is he your friend? And then Zion asked the one question she couldn't dodge. Mommy, is he our dad? Zoe froze. She looked into those curious, trusting eyes and her resolve broke. He told them the truth. Not all of it. Not the pain or the divorce. Just enough. Yes, she said, kneeling beside their bed. Uncle Ivan is your daddy. Zane blinked wide-eyed. Zion's jaw dropped. Are we still allowed to call him boss man? Zion asked. Zoe laughed through her tears. You can call him whatever feels right. Zane was quiet for a long time. Is he staying? Zoe cupped his face. That depends on him. And on you. Ivan arrived the next afternoon with bags of pastries and a nervous energy he couldn't hide. The twins rushed to him as always. Only this time, there was something different in their gaze. Zion tugged at his sleeve. Mommy told us. Ivan crouched slowly. She did. Zane nodded. She said, you're our dad. Ivan's throat tightened. I am. And I'm sorry I wasn't there sooner. Zion threw his arms around him. It's okay. You're here now. Zane was slower, but he came forward and wrapped his arms around Ivan's other side. It was the first time in 5 years Ivan cried. That night, Zoe stood in the hallway and watched Ivan read to the twins. His voice was soft, patient, animated. The boys were curled against him like they'd always belonged there. Maybe they had. Maybe he did. Chapter 7. When the Truth Breaks. It had only been a few days since Zoe told the twins the truth, but everything had changed. Zion, ever the curious one, now insisted on sitting beside Ivan at every chance. He asked 100 questions a day. What's your favorite color, Daddy? Did you like dinosaurs when you were little? Can we build a rocket together? Zane, quieter and more cautious, didn't say much, but he lingered near Ivan more than before. He would rest his head on Ivan's shoulder without a word or slide his drawings into Ivan's briefcase before work. They hadn't just accepted him. They had embraced him. And Ivan, for the first time in his life, felt complete. But one heart had yet to open again. Zoe. She kept him at arm's length. Polite, civil, but distant. Ivan noticed the small ways she guarded herself. The tight smile, the casual deflections, the way she changed the subject whenever their past came up. One evening, after dinner with the boys, he stayed behind while they played in the living room. Zoe stood at the sink washing dishes. Let me help, Ivan offered, stepping beside her. I've got it, she replied, not looking at him. I'd still like to. She sighed but didn't argue. They washed in silence for a while, the clink of dishes the only sound between them. Finally Ivan said, They're amazing. You raced them well. Zoe dried a plate slowly. I didn't have a choice. I know, he said quietly. She turned to face him then, arms crossed. Do you really know what it was like, Ivan? To go through pregnancy alone? To hold your son's hand during a fever and wonder if you were enough? To hear them ask where their daddy is, and not have an answer you didn't choke on. His expression crumpled. I can't undo that. No, you can't, she said, eyes bright with tears. You left me. I didn't know, he whispered. But you didn't ask. Her voice cracked. You just believed what you were told. Signed a divorce letter. Vanished. I thought it was for your good. That I was protecting you from me. That's not protection, Ivan. That's abandonment. He stepped back, guilt written in every line of his face. I want to do better, he said. Not just for the boys, for you. I want to fix what I broke. Zoe closed her eyes for a long moment. You can't fix it with flowers and bedtime stories. This isn't a company deal, Ivan. This is real. I know, he said, voice low. But I'm not walking away again. Zoe looked at him, raw and weary. Then don't expect me to come running either. The days that followed were slow and tentative. Ivan kept showing up. He walked the boys to daycare with her, helped with school projects, made pancakes on Saturdays, with too much syrup, but the boys loved it. Zoe watched, quiet but observant, as Ivan fit into their lives like a long missing piece. Still she kept her heart walled. One weekend Zane fell ill with a high fever. Zoe rushed him to the hospital and without hesitation she called Ivan. He arrived in less than 20 minutes, his face pale with worry. They sat side by side in the ER waiting for the doctor. Zoe's hands trembled. Ivan took them gently. He'll be okay, he whispered. When the doctor finally said it was a viral fever and nothing more, Zoe burst into tears. Ivan didn't speak, he just pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in years she let herself lean on him. For that one fragile moment the wall between them cracked. The next day Zane was home resting on the couch. Zion was drawing beside him and Ivan stepped onto the balcony where Zoe stood alone. He held 2 mugs of tea. One for her. She accepted it without a word. You were incredible yesterday, he said softly. I've never seen anyone fight for someone the way you fight for them. Zoe sipped quietly. Ivan hesitated. Do you think, maybe someday, you could forgive me? Zoe looked out over the city, the breeze playing with her hair. I'm trying, she said. And for now that was enough. Chapter 8. A Father's Redemption. The morning sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows as the scent of cinnamon and vanilla filled the air. Ivan stood at the stove in an apron that read Super Chef, a gift from Zion, and flipped pancakes with surprising focus. Zane sat at the table sketching a robot, while Zion ran around the kitchen pretending to be a flying toaster. Zoe leaned against the doorframe, her coffee in hand, quietly watching the scene unfold. Her once orderly life had turned upside down, but for the first time in a long time it didn't feel like chaos. It felt like home. After weeks of visits, shared dinners, school drop-offs, and laughter, Ivan had become a fixture in the boys' daily lives. Not as a guest. Not as a stranger. As their father. He now knew the difference between Zane's thoughtful silences and Zion's telltale mischief. He memorized their schedules, their favorite snacks, the way Zane liked bedtime stories whispered low, and how Zion insisted on superhero cuddles before sleeping. But most of all, Ivan was learning how to be present. He had once ruled boardrooms and billion-dollar deals with cold logic, but fatherhood? That required warmth, patience, vulnerability. And he was ready. One evening, Zoe arrived home from a site inspection to find Ivan and the boys building a cardboard spaceship in the living room. Colored markers, glue sticks, and cereal boxes were scattered across the floor. Prepare for takeoff, Zion shouted, climbing into the cockpit. Zane adjusted a paper control panel. Coordinates set. Ivan raised an eyebrow. Captain, permission to launch? Zion grinned. Launch granted, Daddy. The word hit Ivan square in the chest. Zoe saw him freeze just for a second. Then he smiled, softer than she'd ever seen. That night, after the boys fell asleep, Zoe found Ivan quietly packing up the mess. She knelt to help. They called you Daddy today, she said, her voice gentle. I heard, he replied, voice husky. I wasn't sure they ever would. You've earned it, she said. Their eyes met, and the distance between them felt smaller than it had in years. One Sunday, Ivan took the twins to the botanical gardens while Zoe attended a solo meeting. It was the first time they spent hours together, just the 3 of them. Under the wide canopy of golden trees, Zane held Ivan's hand while Zion chased butterflies. They visited the koi pond, fed the ducks, and took silly selfies that Zane shyly asked to print for his scrapbook. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, Zane looked up and asked quietly, Will you still be here when I grow up? Ivan knelt in front of him. Yes. Always. Promise. Ivan swallowed the lump in his throat. I promise, Zane. Zion threw himself onto Ivan's back. Me too. I want to grow up with you. Ivan held both boys tightly. You have me now. Forever. Zoe noticed the change. Not just in Ivan but in the boys. Zane, who used to hesitate around new people, now opened up more. Zion, though still wild, seemed calmer. More secure. And she found herself trusting Ivan again. In small ways. Letting him take the boys to school. Inviting him to dinners. laughing with him again. But her heart, still scarred, was slower to follow. One rainy evening while the twins were asleep, Ivan lingered in the living room. Zoe came out with a blanket draped over her shoulders and sat beside him. They listened to the soft patter of rain against the windows. "I missed all of this," he said quietly. "I missed so much." Zoe looked at him. "You're here now. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said, "but I still hope for it." She studied him for a long moment. "You're not the man I married, Ivan." "I know," he said. "You're better." His breath caught. "I don't know where we'll go from here," she added, "but I do know this, you're their father. And they love you." "I love them too," he said. "And I still love you, Zoe." Her heart stuttered. She wanted to believe him. So badly. Before she could respond, a soft cry echoed from the twins' room. Zoe stood, but Ivan gently touched her arm. "Let me." Moments later she heard Ivan's low voice, soothing Zane back to sleep. She sat alone in the quiet, heart full and aching. Maybe healing didn't happen all at once. Maybe it came in small, steady steps. Like this one. Chapter 9. All the Pieces We Lost. The following weeks passed like a quiet symphony, soft, warm, and filled with laughter. Zoe found herself reaching for Ivan without thinking, offering a second cup of coffee, laughing at a memory they once shared, letting her shoulder brush his when they sat close. He'd become a permanent part of the boys' lives, but now he was starting to feel like part of hers again. But the fear still lingered. The memory of the woman he left behind still haunted her. And Ivan could sense it. One late afternoon while the boys were at a playdate, Ivan invited Zoe to a rooftop garden restaurant overlooking city's skyline. They hadn't been alone like this in years. The same skyline where they once spent their wedding anniversary. The same skyline she used to stare at in tears after he left. She hesitated before accepting, but deep down she knew it was time. They sat beneath fairy lights, sipping tea as dusk painted the city in amber and lavender. "You always loved the view," Ivan said, voice soft. "I used to imagine a future here," Zoe replied. "But it turned out different." "I want to build a new one," he said. "With you." "With the boys." Zoe looked away. "It's not that simple." "I know," he said. "I broke your heart. I walked away when you needed me most. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life." She turned toward him, eyes glistening. "I waited for you, Ivan. I gave you every chance to fight for us. But you didn't." "I didn't know how," he whispered. "I believed lies. I let my pride control me. And when I realized the truth, it was too late." Zoe's hands clenched on the table. "I raised them alone. I worked while carrying twins. I cried myself to sleep because I thought I wasn't enough." Ivan reached for her hand, tentative but steady. "You were more than enough. You were everything." Her breath hitched. "I can't erase the pain I caused," he said. "But I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'll never leave again." Zoe stared at their intertwined fingers. "I don't want you to promise me forever, Ivan. I want you to show me day by day. No more grand gestures. Just be here." "I already am," he said. "And I'm not going anywhere." That night after the boys fell asleep, Zoe stood at the window of their apartment. Ivan stood beside her in silence. Zane had asked him to stay and read 2 stories tonight. Zion had drawn a picture of their family spaceship, with Daddy Pilot Ivan at the front. She looked at him now in the soft moonlight, and saw a different man than the one who left her 5 years ago. This one was gentler, warmer, still learning but always trying. Zoe exhaled. "I want to believe in us again." Ivan's eyes met hers, full of quiet hope. "Then let me earn it." The next morning, Zoe woke to the smell of breakfast. Ivan was in the kitchen with an apron over his business suit, flipping eggs while the boys danced around him in their pajamas. "Mommy!" Zion yelled. "Daddy made breakfast. He didn't even burn it this time." Zane handed her a small drawing. It was a picture of their family, 4 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. Zoe smiled through her tears. All the pieces they had once lost were finding their way back. Chapter 10. A New Beginning. Spring arrived with warmth and golden skies, and with it came a quiet transformation. Zoe no longer flinched when Ivan reached for her hand. Ivan no longer questioned his place beside her. And the boys, Zane with his quiet sketches and Zion with his boundless energy, thrived under the new normal. Two loving parents who even after all the storms had found their way back. But one thing remained unfinished. Not for Zoe. For Ivan. He wanted to give her the ending and beginning she had always deserved. He planned it simply. No crowd. No drama. Just honesty and love. It began with a Sunday morning hike in the nearby hills, something the twins had been begging for. Ivan packed a picnic. Zoe brought juice boxes and sunscreen. The boys brought their endless chatter. They reached the summit just before noon. The sky was clear, the wind soft. The city below looked small, like the pain they'd once held. After lunch, while the boys ran off to find magic rocks, Ivan stood beside Zoe as she looked out over the valley. "This view still takes my breath away," she said. "So do you," he whispered. She glanced at him, smiling. Then he dropped to one knee. Zoe froze. Ivan pulled out a small velvet box. "I married you once in fear. I left you in weakness. But today, I ask for your heart again, not as a broken man, but as one who's finally whole." She covered her mouth, eyes wide with emotion. "I don't want to erase our past," he said, voice steady. "I want to build a better future. With you. With our sons. Will you marry me again, Zoe Jacobs? Not because we have to, but because we choose to." Zion let out a dramatic gasp from behind a tree. "Is Mommy crying?" Zane whispered, "Is this the romantic part of the movie?" Zoe laughed through her tears. Then knelt down to Ivan's level and pulled him into a tight, tearful hug. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Their wedding was small, just a garden ceremony at Zoe's favorite cafe. Zane was the ring bearer, so serious and careful, and Zion tried to eat a flower off his boutonniere. Zoe wore a soft ivory dress. Ivan a crisp gray suit. When he took her hand at the altar, there was no trembling. Only peace. This time there was no audience of executives or formality. Just love. And laughter. And second chances. Later that night, Ivan tucked the boys into bed, one on each side of him. Zion leaned into his chest. "So you're really staying forever now?" "I'm never leaving again," Ivan promised. Zane took his hand and whispered, "I'm glad you came back, Daddy." "I'm glad she gave me the chance," Ivan whispered. In the quiet that followed, Ivan stepped out onto the balcony, where Zoe stood wrapped in a shawl, sipping tea under the stars. He slid his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "They love you," she said softly. "They're my everything." She turned to face him. "And me." He kissed her, slow and certain. "You always were." Beneath the stars, the wounds of the past faded. And in their place, something new bloomed. A family not born perfect but reborn in love. Bonus chapter. Ivan's POV. The day I lost her. The day I gave Zoe the divorce papers is seared into my memory with brutal clarity. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself that walking away would protect both of us from further pain. But I was lying. Mostly to myself. I remember entering our apartment, the evening sun casting warm light on the walls we once decorated together. Her shoes were by the door. Her favorite mug, half empty, was on the counter. The faint smell of her shampoo still lingered in the air. And yet I told myself I had to go through with it. My father's voice echoed in my head. "She's lying to you, Ivan. You think she married you out of love? Open your eyes. Look at the messages. Those fabricated messages. Photos. Conveniently timed rumors. You made me believe she was betraying me. And I, like the fool I was, let it poison the one thing that had ever been real in my life." Zoe. She was in the kitchen stirring a pot of soup. She turned with that familiar smile, but it faltered the second she saw the envelope in my hand. "Ivan?" she asked, her voice already shaking. I couldn't speak. I just set the papers down on the counter. He stared at them. Then at me. "What is this?" "I think we need to let each other go," I said coldly, practiced like I wasn't dying inside. Her eyes widened in horror. "Let each other go? What are you talking about?" "You don't love me anymore," I said. "Let's not drag this out." It was the cruelest sentence I'd ever uttered. And the biggest lie. She begged me to talk. To explain. Her voice cracked, her hands trembled. But I stood there, unmoving, frozen in my own delusions. She cried. I didn't comfort her. He asked me why. I didn't answer. I walked out. And when I closed the door behind me, a part of me never walked away. It stayed inside that apartment beside the woman I still loved but couldn't trust. A man too broken by his father's manipulation to fight for the truth. For years I buried myself in work. I told myself she'd moved on. I tried to. But nothing filled the void she left behind. Not business wins. Not luxury. Not success. Nothing. And then, 5 years later, I saw them. 2 little boys with her eyes. And my face. And everything I had tried to bury came rushing back like a flood. Regret. Grief. Love. Hope. I had given up everything I ever wanted because I was afraid to believe in her. But fate, in its strange mercy, gave me a second chance. Not just to be their father, but to be her partner again. And this time, I didn't run. Bonus chapter. Years later. The 5th star in their sky. 5 years later. The sun spilled warmly over the Chou family garden, casting long shadows as laughter echoed through the yard. Zion raced across the lawn with a kite in hand, now a tall 11-year-old with endless energy and a wild mop of curls. Zane sat quietly on a bench nearby, sketching the scene, his style now detailed, precise, mature beyond his years. His latest drawing was of the garden treehouse he'd helped Ivan build last summer. And beneath that treehouse, on a soft picnic blanket, sat Ivan and Zoe, with the newest light of their lives gurgling happily in her lap. Sophie Elaine Chou. 2 years old. Rosebud lips. Wide eyes. Her mother's warmth and her father's stubborn brow. Ivan watched her wave her little fist at a butterfly, her babbling sounds full of curiosity. He reached for her tiny hand and she curled her fingers tightly around his. Zoe leaned against his shoulder, brushing a kiss against his jaw. "She's going to be just like Zion," she said, grinning. "Please no," Ivan groaned with mock dread. "We barely survived him once." Zoe laughed. Zane looked up from his sketchpad. "She's going to be brilliant like Mom." Zion jumped in. "Or hilarious like me." Sophie gave a delighted squeal in response, like she agreed with both. That night the family gathered on the balcony to watch the stars. Zion counted them out loud. 1 for me. 1 for Zane. 1 for Sophie. 1 for Mom. He looked at Ivan. "And 1 for you, boss. Dad." Ivan chuckled, eyes misty. "That makes 5. Zoe leaned her head on his shoulder. 5 stars in our sky." He kissed her temple. "My whole universe." Later, after the twins went to bed and Sophie finally drifted off in her crib, Ivan found Zoe in the kitchen sipping tea, wrapped in a robe. He came up behind her, circling his arms around her waist. "I used to think we'd lost everything," he said quietly. "That one decision destroyed it all. But life gave us more," she whispered. "Not instead of what we lost, but because we chose to try again." Ivan looked at her like she was the sunrise. "I would choose you again," he said. 1,000 times. She smiled. "Even with 2 boys, a toddler and 0 privacy?" "Especially with all of that," he murmured, kissing her softly. In the nursery, Sophie stirred in her sleep, tiny fingers curled around the corner of a blanket Zoe once made while waiting for Ivan to return. Once their family had shattered. Now it shone brighter than ever. Under one roof. Under one sky. Together.